Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today's session. This is the 11th session in the implementation series. Implementation series is intended to help you with more in-depth deep dive into the Marketing Cloud concepts. And today's session is Mobile Studio use cases by our beloved Vlad. And I take this opportunity to give a shout out to Vlad for his continued support. So he's busy, but still making time to share his knowledge and help us with his sessions. And I thank everyone for joining today. With that, I will turn it over to Vlad. And just a note before that, so this session is going to be recorded and it will be uploaded to the YouTube channel. And all the previous sessions from the implementation series are also uploaded to the YouTube channel, Trailblazing Together. You can find the previous sessions and upcoming sessions as well uploaded in the same channel. And any questions you have, please post them in the chat window. And whenever Vlad gets time during the session or at the end of the session, he will address the questions. Thanks once again. Please take it over, Vlad.
All right, thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. Welcome to the series, whether you're just watching live or watching the recording. Great to have you on board, and thank you for this opportunity. My name is Vladimir Salik. I've been with Salesforce for getting closer to 10 years. I've been 9 and a bit. Right now I work with the Alliances Group, specializing on the technical ecosystem enablement, which really means I'm creating the learning experiences for our consulting partners in the partner learning camp and looking after things like accreditation programs, as well as just overall like hands-on and learning experience for different products. My specialties are marketing products and marketing portfolio, even though last probably 2 years I was really heavily focused around CDP, so it took a bit of a shift to change on, but nonetheless, hopefully I still have enough spark to share with you with regards to some of the more traditional sort of digital marketing that we do within Marketing Cloud engagement. I do want to say thank you for your time and appreciate the fact that you spend a bit of time live, whether you're doing it actually after the fact and watching the recording doesn't really matter. It's all worthwhile, and I think it's important that we give you an opportunity to learn from us, but at the same time, I'm grateful for the fact that I did get a chance to come and share some knowledge and experience with you. My objective for today is give you a quick rundown through some of the capabilities of the Mobile Studio portfolio, because there are multiple products that target different channels within the sort of mobile space. I'd love to discuss some of the use cases that how do we apply these mobile products in real life sort of contextual scenarios, and share some tips and tricks with regards to implementation, mainly because there've been few, like, even though it's a defined set of scenarios and defined set of applications on how do we use these products, but there are a few tricks that if you're new to that, you might miss, and it kind of leads you down to a bit of a unsuccessful path, as I call it. So with that, I guess we'll move up to Q&A, and this is not necessarily a structure. I'm just gonna go into like, these are the topics that I'd love you to take away from today as overall sort of learning outcome. And I was hoping we might get a bit more people online today, but just curious before we start, like if you hear the word mobile, what does come into your mind? And if you don't mind putting into the chat, so what resonates with you straight away? And I'll pause for like 10 seconds or now or before that. So if you hear mobile, does it resonate with SMS, with a push notification, with something else? Like, what is your take on mobile itself? So I'll keep that pause for a brief 5 more seconds or so. Notification, thank you. That's one, probably quite common that a lot of people will think about notifications, but the reason I kind of bring this up is I guess there's element of uniqueness and confusion at the same time within the terminology, because we do now have a mix of like old technology, more traditional SMS messaging, I guess, which have been sort of developing over the last probably 20 years or so. Then you've got, proliferation of the mobile applications, and then you get to the point where things like Facebook Messenger or Twitter, like, are they mobile or are they social? So in that, when these sort of terminologies and technologies come into the way, it becomes a bit more complicated to define what mobile really means. And I think from analyzing where our customers and how they sort of consume our products, and thinking through the lens of like, if you're a brand that tries to interact with your customers, you want to be able to talk to them wherever they are. So that message of relevancy is super applicable, especially in the mobile world. And depending on the geolocation, like we've seen a very big difference with regards to intake of different technologies. So if you think about where do you start with mobile marketing? Is it post the email marketing? Is it post social marketing? Is it post advertising and whatnot? In different places, you'll actually have a different result. So I think it is important to recognize that. And it is important to recognize that mobile is not a single individual channel. This is more broader than that. And when we talk about relevancy, it is super important to understand that it needs a bit more deep dive into what particular mobile channel, what is the right mobile channel for the end customers that we should be communicating them and sending the right appropriate content. If you look into some of the different ways of how do we drive and how do we see the mobile complementing overall digital marketing, right? It provides the ability to be real time. It's one of the greatest opportunities that we sort of really see being strong as a play, because mobile is something that you can initiate and send out immediately, and people see it most of the time immediately. It does have component and flavor of location-based targeting. In some scenarios, it's really cool when you get your customers, and I don't know if you personally experienced that. I did experience that a couple of times only in my last 5 years or so when I start paying attention to that. So it's not as well sort of spread out, but it would be a great thing. And we trying to incite, or rather excite our customers to think through how can we engage with people based on where they are located. And then one of the other things is that same device can be actually a representation of multiple channels. That's an interesting concept, right? If you think about email, we traditionally say, well, you can look at your email on the desktop, on your laptop, at work, at home. You can have 2 or 3 mobile devices, like a tablet, a mobile phone, or 2 different mobile phones if you've got work and personal, like I do, as an example. But when we talk about mobile channel, all of a sudden we're actually targeting in a very different way, because the mindset changes that people have a single device, but we can talk to them on the same device through 2, 3, maybe more different options. And that's exciting, because if we can't reach person on one of these channels, then all of a sudden we have an opportunity to try and reach out to them using a different avenue. And I think that's important. It's important from the data management perspective. It's important from overall strategy point of view when you think and design these different experiences for yourself or for your customers. With regards to where it fits, I think it's important to always defining the right segments. The mobile itself implies that it's the first party sort of targeting, and within marketing cloud space, when you start thinking about these journeys, when you're doing all of these messaging, whether it's real time or if you're doing proactive sort of communication send out, you need to make sure that you target people in a very accurate and precise ways. And I'll actually talk about that slightly later on in one of the what not to do kind of use cases and how to target that. Some of the statistics, it's not necessarily put a lot of information on you, but at the same time, I think it's a great insight, and it's something that I came across more recently when we were doing a quarterly review of the business, in terms of understanding which particular mobile channel has more tendency and opportunities for us to look at and target at, and what are the areas for the product team to focus on in terms of growth and in terms of ability to expand platform capabilities when we start talking about feature functions. So it just really kind of give us some pointers to say, like, there's a pretty active audience base, and depending on how we send these different communications, it might give us more and more opportunities to engage, be relevant, and really excite customers when it comes down to communications and conversations with the different brands. If you think about yourself, just kind of like put the thought out there. Would you be a person who is attributed to all of these options, right? Do you receive SMS messages? Do you receive push notifications? Do you receive WhatsApp or any other sort of messaging application messages? And if you do, then effectively you're part of that sort of big number. But for us, I think when we look at these sort of figures, it's really interesting that mobile is the second biggest marketing channel after email today. And I think that's the big value outcome when we analyzing the business. We do see a huge opportunity from the messaging standpoint of view, and as I said, connecting to the clients. Once again, I guess multiple channels. So mobile is not a single channel, and quite often people get confused when we talk about mobile. They refer to either SMS or push notifications, but it's a little bit more. I'll take away the first mobile optimized experience when we talk about landing pages or cloud pages or even emails that are mobile responsive. That's something that really sits within the more traditional sort of email marketing space. But thinking about your mobile app, that's the messaging that we can connect to. Think about SMS communications and thinking about different chat applications that we can apply and use to interact with the customers. Mobile is great because it's convenient. It's easy for consumers. It's short, it's brief, it's on the point, and quite often it's an opportunity to make a target contact or target individual to take an action. Unlike email, where it sort of seems to be more traditional, based on your empathy and desire to engage and free time and what else is sort of fighting for your attention at this moment in time, mobile seem to be a bit much more on the dot. If you receive an SMS, you tend to, at least I've asked few people for that, and I do behave like that the same. It's a bit more prominent action call for me, as opposite to I've got an email, and even if it's urgent and it's got the most attractive call to action, I can still put it into to-do list and get back to that later down the track, while mobile messages seem to be a bit more real-time prompts to act on and behave on them. Okay, I will start with Mobile Studio Mobile Connect. That's the first product we're going to quickly look through, and a high-level overview to what is involved into whole send. You know, as a practitioner, as a consultant, as a just user, it's good to understand that there's a component of that whole conversation, I'll call it this way, that kind of sits with our sort of platform as a provider for that service. But at the same time, there are carriers that are really private networks. And if you think about them as like Telstra and Optus in Australia, if you look into T-Mobile, AT&T in the United States, and broadly, Vodafone, Verizon, like plenty of these different carriers across the world. There's a lot of these people. But what's important, they're private networks. They're not public internet. That's something that quite often is hard to control. And we don't control them. So our conversation, when we start sending communications, and there's a bit of an expectation sometimes to see, was the message delivered? Or did the person open it? Did they do something with it? There's a few kind of chains in that whole conversation network in order to be able to understand what actually happened and has the message been delivered. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about design and applicability, that we are responsible for one part of that conversation flow, but there is quite a few hops down the step, down the flow and down the stream rather, that sort of have a bit of an extra dependency. Second thing to pay attention to, there's a simple abbreviation here, MT and MO. And if you're new to Mobile Connect itself, there's two terms that are quite often used. So when we send communication to a consumer, to the target person, that is known as MT, which is really abbreviation for mobile terminated. So it finishes up at the mobile device. Then MO, it's a response. So it originates from the phone, and therefore it's mobile originated. So that's a message that's been sent from the mobile phone back to the platform. So we can sort of receive these messages in response to customers sending them. The second big thing or an additional thing to keep in mind with regards to Mobile Connect and SMS itself is the world is a huge place. I'm sure you know that. There's more than 1,000 different mobile networks like worldwide, and each of them have their own rules. And when we come down to the things that you need to be aware of, like the simple example, SMS versus MMS. So multimedia messages versus short text messages. They are different, but SMS seems to be traditionally almost available everywhere versus sort of media messaging is a bit more restrictive, and it's currently applied within the North America. And therefore, if you're having conversations with customers, or if you are one of the customers who are thinking about applying, can I send MMS? It's restricted to the geography and location. So keep that in mind when you're making decisions. In addition to that, keep in mind some of the rules about providing and provisioning codes in order to be able to send communications. Again, goes back to the world is a big place. Everyone has their own rules. And we, because we're only one part of the whole sort of conversation chain, we should be compliant with what the local operators sort of imply on us. And with regards to that is an example of how do we send messages. We've got a code that is allocated very much like your mobile phone, assigned a number, and we in some geographies we do have ability to provision what we refer to as a shortcode. So it's a sort of a shortened numeric value that people can engage with, and difference and biggest sort of differentiator with the long codes is short number. So it's convenient, it's easy to remember. You can stick it into the the printout media and put in the store or use anywhere else. It's just convenience, really. There's not any extra super benefit comparing to long codes, but just something to kind of be aware of. And long code itself is a normal phone number, so that's what you would normally refer to as when you're sharing your phone number. That would be the full 10-digit number, or if you want to include countries, might be slightly different, so whether you use plus sign or not. But ultimately, that's the entire full code number. It is not necessarily carry approved for commercial sending in some of the countries. So again, when we do provisioning, it's super important that when you sort of setting up Mobile Connect within your account, you'll have to work with the account executives to understand what are the capabilities between all of these different options, and whether or not, for example, can you send two-way conversation, like you sending the message and receiving the message, while in some geographies we can only send messages but not necessarily receive the messages back. Similar to that, there is a notion that is a sender ID, which is really an alphanumeric name. If you're in Australia, you would be familiar with like AusPost or Optus, in regards to recent sort of conversations about the data breaches. They would be sending these sort of SMS messages, and instead of being sent from the long number, they send like a textual sort of representation. They can say it's an Optus company, or they can say it's a such and such who's sending the message. It's a bit of a challenge in the way because it's only for one-way communication. So you can send it from the platform, but you are not able to respond back because there is no number behind it. So technically, by the time the message that sort of ends up in the device, it's not really be able to communicate with the message itself. Now, few things to know how the messages operate. Again, this is just like a pre-run into what we can and cannot do and shouldn't do. It kind of goes back to compliance. That specific stop message handler is ability for an individual to unsubscribe from your communications. Unlike email, where you can click on the link or you can go up and fill up the form, traditionally these are the ones that, like on the mobile channel, require you to provide ability for people to respond back and say, stop, I don't want to receive anything. And that's very simple sort of message handling, where we automatically recognize things like stop, quit, cancel, and unsubscribe. And essentially we're just unsubscribing from the whole number. So once the person is unsubscribed from a mobile message, they effectively unsubscribe from all the all conversations across all the keywords within that particular code itself. Similar to that, help, it's geographically different how it's required, but in message it provides an opportunity for people to understand how they can sort of have a conversation through the SMS messaging backward to the platform. It can be customized, absolutely. It's required for compliance, and in some cases, because it's not enforced geographically, it's a best practice to be able to say, if you need to understand what you can request through the SMS message, then send the help keyword, and we'll give you like a bit of a rundown what you can sort of ask through the SMS conversation. The default message handler is a very interesting one, and the last point on that slide, it talks about super secret AMP script. So in practical terms, what it means is if people sending SMS messages into a code and you were not sort of specifically listening for them, then that default message handler is effectively a catch-all thing. So it receives the message, it knows what keyword or what sort of payload was provided in that SMS. And from that moment onward, you can become very creative. One of the interesting practical examples, we used, one of my colleagues designed a very interesting solution with regards to getting specific promotional discounts. So imagine if the customers are being communicated through an email, a catalog of offers for a given month. So you receive an email that says, for this month, there's 10 products and you have a special discount. And in order to receive a discount code, you need to send an SMS with that particular product keyword. and you will get the discount code back. So when you're going up into the store, you can scan the barcode, or if you're doing online shopping, then you can put the code into the into the checkout and effectively get a discount. What was interesting is when we analyzed that as a requirement, there is, say, 4+ million people in the database, and each of them will receive 10 plus different product offers on a monthly basis. That's a very large volume of the keywords if you want to sort of set it up in the way that you would traditionally work with Mobile Connect. So you set up the keyword, you set up the handler, and essentially saying if someone sends an email, SMS to that particular keyword on that number, then we can handle it in a certain way. For this scenario, it was ridiculously impossible to go into that because volume-wise, it just wouldn't make sense. So my colleague, who was quite creative and came up with the idea, why don't we get a different mobile number and we use that specifically for these offers? And what we do is we just rely on default handler for doing all of the sort of allocation of the codes and doing the lookups and so forth. So what it ended up being is you receive an SMS that is sent to the mobile number. It has a keyword, which is, payload from the offers. So say send specific keyword to that number. Then within the message itself, we do the AMP script, do the lookup into the data extension to establish, does that customer have that particular offer assigned to them? If they do, then we will get the discount code that was generated for them and give them SMS and mobile message to respond to. So they've got options to redeem these codes. Very creative. So it might seem like it's insignificant, but if you get to the cases where you need a lot of different keywords, or if you need to, maybe another option to consider like different geographical sort of unsubscribes or subscription based on, across the brand, multiple sub brands and so forth, the default keyword can become very, very good friend if you know how to work with that. And that takes me to some of the use cases that I wanted to kind of quickly go through. So when you go into the Mobile Studio, Mobile Connect specifically, when you're defining SMS and MMS configurations, you've got a few templates that are provided within the tool. And these will give you an option to configure sort of a conversation or one-off style communication. You can see that you can do things like outbound message, which is your traditional, here's an SMS, we're sending it to the audience, versus you might look into things like info capture or potentially email opt-in, where people can send their email in response to the platform. And then what we do is we set up the data extension, pass the email, save it out, and then get them to kind of work with us after that. So the different options, different templates, and they all sort of need for different scenarios. But as long as you kind of understand what your use case is, whether you just want to have like a two-way conversation, so something like a text response, which is a second frequent one used. An example could be we can send a message and the person responds back, we can reply back, and it becomes backwards, forwards conversation. So as long as there is a right setup of the keywords to tie these conversations together, it becomes like a single story backwards and forwards. Interestingly for me, not all of these are widely spread in terms of, again, goes back to my initial conversation, depending on the geolocation, the use of all of these different things are differently. But let's have a look into beyond the traditional sort of campaign style conversations and messages that we send. What can we do? So let's say if you've got minimal subscriber data stored within the Marketing Cloud and we want to do a bit of a scripting, we want to retrieve all opt-outs from the particular SMS campaign maybe. The jet ski purchase data will be pushed to Marketing Cloud, allow for website sign up of SMS communications. There are few examples where it is practical to use SMS messaging, but it's sort of a little bit outside of what traditional templates give you as an option. So that's where the beauty of the AMP script that is still supported within the SMS conversations, that you can start looking into how do we stretch, I guess, the capability of the platform. So in this particular scenario, customer wants to use basically Marketing Cloud as a gateway. So you receive a text, forward request using AMP script to third-party system, and then it will kind of do a bit of a logic itself. So let's say, looking for appointment to request a vehicle or something like that. And then we don't really know what's happening in terms of assignment and processing. It's a business process flow that sort of happens in the third-party system, but it gives us a call back through REST API. So we receive the response back and say, okay, now we sending the actual text message back to the consumer. And that's kind of provide us ability to almost kind of embed a third-party system into the conversation, but at the same time, we're still messaging through Marketing Cloud. So, you subscribe for the service, we did the send, we initiate the conversation and trigger a third-party system, then we sit down and wait, nothing happens, then the third-party systems come back to us, initiates the message. So there's plenty of these different options, but it's kind of like thinking creatively that because we do have access to AMP script within a message, so when we receive a communication in response to customer sending that service text to a particular number, we can process. So when we do the reply, we can effectively process the AMP script, and then we can even cancel out the message sent as a response. But we've done data collection, we parsed the message that came through, we initiated call to the third-party system, and then we sit down and wait. So that's one interesting example to think through. Where similar idea, if you want to receive opt-outs from SMS campaigns, so customer want to be informed of any opt-outs in the near real time, you do kind of send a message to to the Marketing Cloud. Again, we picking up that message, we're responding that, we're writing to the data extension, potentially doing a bit of a lookups, and we kind of providing a bit of a response back. Again, this could be done through API, that can be done through maybe a landing page handling. You can get to send out the email with the messages. It's just more ability to think through that when people send a message to Marketing Cloud, in this case, we have, again, a chance to kind of start executing some of the AMP script and become creative into what can we do. And HTTP post in this particular example can provide us an opportunity to handle like an opt-outs or a lookup for all the previous opt-outs in the real time and so forth. Someone is making a purchase, I guess. So we want to do the data lookups again. There's, like if someone says, okay, do I have any particular claim inquiries and so forth? So we can receive the message, we can do the lookup, and we can respond and say, yes, you do have an outstanding service claim, or we don't. So kind of making it conversational. It's a two-way conversation, but because we do have access to the data, it could be your service data that's been synchronized through the synchronized data extensions. We can do the lookup and say, out of 3 cases to have been resolved, 1 of them is still outstanding, so we can surface that up. If nothing is in the queue, then we can change the content of the message that we're presenting back and say, no, all your cases have been resolved. There's nothing else for you to follow up. So it becomes, as you can see, it becomes a bit of a conversation backwards and forwards. And then one of the other interesting ones, and I'll probably drill into this one specifically a bit more, is the customer want to sign up for SMS on their website. There's no problem. We have a great opportunity within Mobile Connect to initiate what's called QMO API call, because remember that MO, it's mobile originated. So what we're doing is we're simulating as if the customer would send the text message. So we're doing like a bit of a mimicking the real life behavior. And from the website, we triggering the process. If the person sort of opted in, we put them into maybe a journey. And again, we might start sending conversations. Now, you might ask me, like, why would that be too complicated? We can just get people to do, sign up. And you most likely have seen in some cases the, mobile only offers where you like text specific value to the number X, Y, and Z, and you'll get like a promotion. I haven't seen that widely spread in Australia, although I know some of our customers did try these campaigns. And the biggest thing, an issue they face in that specific scenario is subscriber key at that point in time is not something that you have access to. And kind of going back into like, hold on a second, what do you mean? So think about you receiving an SMS. At that point in time, the only thing you know is the mobile number. The system, when it receives an SMS message, it registered that mobile number as an inbound customer within the contacts database, and all of a sudden you have a contact that has subscriber key or contact key set to the value of the mobile number, and that's all we've got. So at that point in time, it's kind of like too late for us to try and do any lookups and try to kind of figure out and initiate, actually, this is a contact that we have already an existing subscriber key for, and it's not the mobile number. Let's say it's just the CRM contact ID. So we want to use that. And that's where that convenience of being able to simulate the kind of call from the mobile phone, what we do is we get people to go to the website. We give them an option to say, like, get the text. So you put your phone number in. At that point in time, when someone clicks sign up, what we do is we do the lookup, or we might even register a new lead or contact in CRM, get the contact key, we've got the phone number, and then we initiate that mobile originated thing, so that becomes a contact with a fully qualified subscriber key. This is one of the interesting patterns, and I think it wasn't adopted as much, like that whole concept of trying to initiate mobile sort of originated offers, like effectively expand your database of contacts or leads or prospects through phone, mainly because on the early days we didn't really have a way to handle that in a better way. So we ended up with pollution in the contacts database. We've got more contacts in the Marketing Cloud contact account, and customers were not really happy with that. So that was kind of like an approach that went out and wasn't so widely adopted. But today it seems to be coming back a bit, at least in some of the geolocations. I know for a fact in the United States, that's a very common scenario for using that. All right, some of the other things to be aware of. People do ask a lot about how do we know who do we send to, and how do we know all the details of like the message and delivered, undelivered, and all that sort of stuff, and what was the conversation and so forth. One of the great things about sending up the SMS is we actually have a good report that provides you access to a good level of insight. So you can see when the message was sent, you can see subscriber key if we send it out to, you've got the actual payload of the text, you can see the mobile number, you can see locale, you can see if it originated from on the phone or the platform was sending it. So you can do a pretty hefty analytics to understand what was the kind of the workflow behind the scenes. You can pull this out as a report. You can ingest it into Marketing Cloud through, into the data extension. You can do, put it out into analytic tools if you need to kind of better analyze and visualize that. But that's one of the great ways to do a very first line of troubleshooting is to go, we seem to be not reaching the end customer, download the report, have a look into the status, was it delivered, not delivered, and so forth. So you can get a pretty good insights out of that report. And it's not always adopted and used. And one of the things to say, remember I talked about the sort of subscription and relevancy and whatnot. There was a customer, there was a brand that sometime back, and if you're interested, you can find this particular article. They sent more than 500,000 unsolicited SMS messages. So someone in the marketing team was very smart, decided to blast out the coupons to every phone number they ever captured. There was no consent management. There's absolutely just spray and pray. And some customers received up to 16 messages in a row in the middle of the night with, unsolicited offers. So that settling up costed them around 15, like it was, I think it was a bit more than $15 million altogether, because they effectively get to the point they've got like about $500 per text message violation. So the reason I kind of bring this up is it is super important to keep in mind that consent management with SMS is very, very important. And that's partially one of the reasons that in some geographies, the provisioning of the codes are taken up to 12 weeks for us in order to establish the code for the customer on their account, mainly because there is a rigorous process to assess and evaluate how it's done. So I've seen in the last couple of years, there's a big improvement and change in India for how that's done. More recently, New Zealand is coming up to the point where there's a bit of almost like we need to be able to take away the cost from people who are trying to unsubscribe and whatnot. So there's a lot of these different complexities across the world that it is important to be aware of. And I guess, like as a takeaway thought here is, because legal can take the whole story and session on its own, but one thing is you should kind of really question, like, how do you target people? You need to make sure that you do get an opt-in, and instead of just trying to do like implied opt-ins, because SMS seem to be much more sensitive and much more personal channel, and in the sense that people get very sort of emotional with regards to receiving SMS that they didn't really expect. So that's something that is really, really important to keep in mind. And then, there's different options that you can apply, but important to know that Marketing Cloud is a platform that provides you ability to do certain things. It's just up to you as an end customer or as the consultant to decide how you want to handle it and how you're going to manage that. Like, responsibility for interpretation of the different laws is with clients, and we only can kind of provide an advice to say, like, have you considered these and that? But it's absolutely not legal advice, and therefore it's something to be not taken lightly when you start talking to that. All right, there's another thing I wanted to mention with regards to SMS. We're talking about SMS on its own, its messages, that's great, but there's another way to think within the Salesforce platform a bit broadly. There's a tool that's called digital engagement. And when we think about them is you need to have like a specific edition of the Service Cloud in addition to Marketing Cloud, and you need to have a digital engagement SKU. So it's a different product, but the whole concept of what you can do as a use case is an interesting one, because you think about initiating marketing conversation. So we're doing proactive reach to the audience. We're sending them SMS. We're engaging them with specific sort of call to action. The customer starts responding, but instead of handling the response back and forward within the Marketing Cloud, we can start channeling that conversation into the Service Cloud. And all of a sudden, we pick up the conversation by an agent. We start chatting with the customer in real time. So it becomes a more personalized, more interesting engagement from that single point onward. So we're doing an outbound marketing. We're picking up the response in real time, kind of writing it to the service agent, who then starts a real-time conversation backward and forward with the customer. I think it's super powerful, but it kind of goes back to remind you that it can get confusing, because we sort of do have that two-way conversation sort of set up in Marketing Cloud, but there's a difference because they're two different products, they're two different SKUs, and you kind of operate in the different places. The outbound initiated sort of conversation starts in Marketing Cloud itself as a promotion, and then ends up being more like a one-to-one sort of service agent with an individual conversation within the Service Cloud itself. There's a difference between, if you see here, the short code on the Marketing Cloud and the bit longer code on the service conversation. That's expected and something to keep in mind. But either way, today is not really the meant to go and deep dive into how it's all done, but it's a great story if you have customers, or if you're the customer yourself and you have service and you have SMS, you can think about combining marketing with service in a really nice way. So if you'd want to know more, feel free to reach out if you need more advice, but just something to explore, I guess. All right, very quick break. People on the line, can you guess what year this photo was taken? It's just an interesting kind of pause for me to breathe in, breathe out briefly. So if you don't mind typing in the chat, when do you think this photo was captured? 2012, 2005, 15, 5. It's close enough. That was 2008. So yeah, plenty of different devices, different screen sizes and different charges. So it was pretty complex, and I don't think it's changed like to the full degree yet today, but we are in a better place. And the reason I bring up, right, this is we're talking about the mobile push and effectively messages that we're sending from from the server to the mobile app. So Facebook notification, Instagram notification, you've got specific apps that sort of send different messages. They are familiar to, or similar rather, to SMS in the sense that it's a message that gets out, but it's a bit more interesting from the payload perspective, but at the same time, it's a different way to set it up. So from the message, if you're thinking about like campaign messaging, if you're thinking about just conversations that we can send out, you've got traditional sort of, outbound message that goes out. You've got location oriented, so geofencing, as it's commonly referred to when people are going through the geofence or leaving the geofence, we can capture that and initiate the send. We can connect to beacons, and we can have inbox messaging altogether. There are different types for different sort of types of use cases. If you're looking into combining these things together, interesting thing is you will see that we've got one of the cases where alert plus cloud page that comes into picture, because we're using standard push notification and then adding dynamic content within the app. So when the message is being displayed, it actually becomes a bit more full. So similar to that, when you've got a simple notification, you click on the message and then we splash the page, which is really a mobile sort of designed cloud page, provides better engagement, provides more payload. So it's not just a text, it's something that you can get customers into and make them take an action further. So you kind of continue the engagement from that point onwards. We can send inbox messages that sort of link to cloud pages too, like similar to maybe a LinkedIn app if you use it, or email inbox. So you go up into the inbox toolkit, and then you can see these pretty much like almost like an email on the mobile phone. So it's a similar kind of concept. In-app messages, they've got different types of templates. So when you start building them out, in the Journey Builder or outside, you've got Content Builder to your support. I guess you just popping up the message in the app. So different options to set it up, but really it's interaction with the audience within the context of the mobile application. So if you ever seen it, here's a pop-up, you click on it and it sort of renders the page. It feels like you are still within the app itself. So it's not like you open up in a different place, take them to the website through the browser. It sort of all sits within the mobile app experience, and it sort of connects people to take an actions. Similar to Mobile Connect for SMS, the multiple parties involved in the push messaging for us. We ultimately kind of providing ability to send a message, but we need to go up and talk to the push notification services depending on the platform. So if you're an Apple or Android user, you would know that there are different types of push notification services. So Apple and Google, they represent kind of like mobile carriers for SMS in the same way, and they do control content filtering. They do provide authorization for us to send it, registration of the devices and so forth. So it's their network, it's not public internet, and it's much more complicated, even probably comparing to SMS in the sense of how it all works out. So if you're developing a mobile app, and if you're thinking about like how do we target our customers and engage with them, there's a whole lot of consideration from the development standpoint of view when it comes down, how do we actually reach the device before you think about what content do we send. With mobile push, oops, the slide got a bit wiggy. We've got, you're probably familiar with Datorama or Marketing Cloud Intelligence reports. We have two different SKUs or two different options. There's included reporting that provides a bit of a high level summary, but there is another layer if you go into the advanced SKU that gives you much more insights, and you get customizable dashboards, and you kind of get to interact with data on the deeper level comparing to the just high level aggregate summary. So instead of just saying like how my message is being delivered and as an aggregate, you can probably drill into a bit more and kind of break it down, what's delivered, what's not, and so forth. Similar to Mobile Connect, and I do apologize, the slide got a bit tweaked as well. Message detail is most useful granular report. Like if you ever need to understand, opt-ins, opt-outs, like all the other details of the send, fantastic way within the platform to get the data. And because it's sort of a CSV format, you almost, you're free to do whatever you want with that. You can ingest it into Marketing Cloud back. A lot of times for both Mobile Connect and Mobile Push, I personally was working on a number of these implementations where we use that data to further sort of influence the decision on targeting and how do we navigate customers through the different journeys. Like that was partially today maybe replaced with Einstein activities within the Journey Builder for mobile, but at the same time, like a bit of a sometime back, we still get more insights and we can make decisions in the way that customers required us to do to channel conversation. So Mobile Connect, right? You set up the number, you start sending messages, relatively easy. With Mobile Push, you need to think about SDK, and this is something to think through. It's effectively a way for an application to talk to the Marketing Cloud platform, and it's a framework where we already put some code together. And as an application developer, what you would do is you take that code and embed it into the app. So whether you're doing Android, whether you're doing Apple development, there's a different type of sort of library that you have to import and work with in order to facilitate that exchange between the mobile application and the platform. We've taken care of some of the things like how to handle authentication, like we ease up the conversation effectively, but there's still work that needs to be done in order to make them work fine and make the magic sort of flow. The very important thing is kind of goes back to a super significant messages. Like you need to set up subscriber key when you connecting the device. The system will produce and generate randomized value at the start, and unless you get to the point where you authenticate the user and assign them some kind of ID, that device is going to have a system generated value. Why does that matter? Go back into think about journey, think about targeting. If you don't have a governed sort of key value, that just rather instead have a generated value, you don't really know who you're talking to. It's almost like, I know that there is a device. I know that they sign up and downloaded the app, they sign up into the application or use it, maybe go to some of the engaged pages, but you can't really say who they are. So you haven't really captured the data. You might start collecting some of the attributes, but I think at that point in time, it would be most relevant to actually assign them the key. So register them as a contact or lead or any other way to identify them and say, okay, this is now a permanent key. And that from that moment onwards, the contact will become connected to the other data in Marketing Cloud. And that way you can truly do cross-channel conversations where you can take from mobile push to maybe SMS, maybe back to the email. That's very important. The SDK gives you an opportunity to do attributes, so you can start capturing details of the person. And then the other key thing is you've got tags. That's a really, really cool value, sort of key value pair that you can use to keep track of all kinds of preferences. So it can be implicit things, or you can be flags, or you can be almost kind of going through the fact that because people reach a certain point in the app, you can assign them a tag and then use the tag for your segmentation and targeting purposes. Very cool way of kind of thinking about how do you almost like assign them to a particular segment by the virtue of assigning a tag. Reach push, we spoke about that briefly, but in essence, it's just ability to add rich media content through the cloud page. So you've got image, video, GIFs, audio. On Android, it's only static content. So there's a difference between different providers, and therefore just important to kind of keep in mind how they differentiate. And then interactive notification. So you put some control into the user. We can get them to take actions from within the message. And like you can see that here it has add to passbook or view an offer. So that sort of like the buttons at the top, maybe not super visible, but essentially you've got an NTO, here's your weekly 20% off in store, and then you've got two buttons. These are the what we call interactive notification, where we allow for the receiver to see some kind of buttons, and you can connect what the people can do through these button clicks. Spoke about geofence. That's, I guess, sort of more or less, it used to be a hot topic a few years back. I think today's not as much, but again, could be creative with that if you're doing some gamifications and whatnot in that sense. If people are sort of doing install. You'll need location to be set up around targeted area, and mobile app user either enters or exits the geofence. These are like the triggers that do that, and they receive notification on the device. So if you're driving past, you can say redeem your offer with fresh order. I mean, they're great and interesting options to use. It really means that the customers will have to think through how they target people, and it's relevant if you've got a distributed sort of network of I guess franchises or branches that people might visit, and you can engage them in real time. So we used to have a campaign where two vendors in the retail store, like in a big supermarket, were sort of not fighting each other, but fighting for customers, I should rather say. And one of our customers set up the geofence against their competitor. So as soon as the customer was going up into the store, and I mean, that's assuming that they've got an app and all the other things, they would trigger an offer and say, hey, if you come back to our store, which is like 20 meters away, then you're going to get like an extra discount or some hot offer and whatnot. So that was kind of like being a bit creative to kind of say, how do we apply the geofence in the practical terms. Beacons are similar in a sense to geofence, but they provide ability to connect the devices and kind of as soon as a mobile phone interacts with that particular device, to kind of say, hey, I'm right next to you. So they get like proximity sensors and they can trigger the communication based off that. So they're like geofences, but in a sense, it's more, you're not defining a specific area, but you're kind of going up and says, as soon as your mobile phone interacts or application through the phone interacts with that device, then we can trigger some action based off that. So it's micro locations. They are placed in department stores. We're tracking which particular beacon triggers the message, and then it downloads the message and sends it to the customer. So that's again one of the interesting features to do. One of the things that comes in mind when people talking about like, do I use SDK, do I not? Because they might have concerns about security. They might think about making the application super light and so forth. So there is a way that you can work with Marketing Cloud through just APIs, but at the same time, it's not necessarily as exciting because you're losing in some of these capabilities, right? So it's important to kind of keep in mind like what we can and cannot do. So we thinking about going forward in the future, modularizing the SDK. It becomes lighter, it becomes smaller, and much more customizable. So you can, as a developer, choose what components you need. If you're not using most of it, you can kind of go down and talk about like a smaller footprint. But at the same time, again, just knowing what is and is not available through SDK versus if you just go plain API exchange to initiate the message, like two different ways of kind of thinking through how you initiate the message and what communications can you send and so forth. Some of the common features that are being asked for location-wise, Marketing Cloud doesn't store location of the customer, so it's important that sometimes we might use an scrape so we can get like a latitude and longitude, but at the same time, like we can't just target people who say we want to target everyone who lives in a particular state or particular city. Like that's just not something that we do, and that's something to bear in mind. Users not necessarily refreshed automatically in the audiences. And then the other thing is when you look into different things like iOS and Android are native SDKs, we do support Cordova, but others are not supported platforms. So like Xamarin was one of the things that seemed to be popping up more and more in some conversations. We just not necessarily support them. If you need to get sort of broader analytics, again, there are partners that we work with, and you just need to know if you need these features or not and when to use them. All right, and then one last thing that I hopefully briefly want to talk through is Group Connect, which is sometimes could be a bit sort of misleading, like in a sense, what does it mean? It's a third piece of the Mobile Studio, and it's not turned on, I think, by default, but it may or may not. So like depending on your sort of license and package, you may or may not see it on the home screen. But in essence, it's ability for us to send outbound messages and responses and promote account through some of the connections with the OTT network. So, over the top, I think they're called, it's in essence, if you know, like Line, WeChat, WhatsApp communications, these are the ones that we sort of talk into. They are similar to push and SMS again, in the sense that we are just like a step in the chain. So keep that in mind. It's important. It's convenient because you kind of work with us to get all of these arranged, but it's important at the same time to know that we still have to go through their channel approval and so forth. So you can't necessarily do whatever you want. It's the network that decides that what they allow you to do, very much like any other channels. It does also have an impact on pricing. So you have different SKUs and costs, and therefore even the setup fees would be different for different networks. So we kind of look into that, how we're changing in the future. But one of the interesting things that I did want to bring up today is we did recently analysis, and the lead into some of the announcement we did during the Dreamforce is if we looked into the spread of the different applications, we kind of thought about how can we strategically find the right partner to have a longer term strategy specifically in that sort of chat-like conversation. And we'll look into that, and kind of that map shows like an easy solution, right? Like how many users are actually using WhatsApp application comparing to any other options that might be supported. So for us, that was an interesting point of discovery, and I think the way we're looking into that is we're trying to think more proactively, what is the holistic customer experience? We want to be able to kind of think about like conversational commerce. We want to be able to think about conversational service, which some things are already here and there, and you've got these sort of features and integration working. But we want to make sure that people can market, respond, purchase, or transact rather, and then get support through the same channel of conversation. And we can reach out to them, they can reach back to us, we can support them as they go through the process of making a purchase, of like payment integration, ordering integration, and so forth, and then get down to the point where, hey, I've got the problem, can I raise the case, and it's all sort of integrated and flows nicely. And that was our strategic partnership announcement during the Dreamforce. If you heard that, that's great. If you haven't, we're effectively partnering with Meta to build up one of a kind, I guess, integration with messaging with WhatsApp. So stay tuned on more details on that. But that's something that I think will change the way we do mobile marketing pretty much as of next year, because that's something that's been heavily developed on. And just looking into that, there's a bit of an interesting mix on the slide, so I do apologize for that. But in essence, there was a distinction between the two different types of messaging. So we got transactional and session messages within WhatsApp itself, but maybe use cases like extending what we had before is you kind of setting up the templates, we personalizing the template, and then we adding to the customer conversation. So you can include much more information. I mean, if you haven't used WhatsApp, but if you use some other sort of messaging application, you'll be familiar with the experience overall. And we just want to provide that ability for marketers to be able to power these conversations. maybe better personalization. We can ask customers about their details. We can engage them through like QR codes and whatnot. So it's a really, really powerful way to look into that. And if you do want to look into that today, we do have a partnership with Cinch for WhatsApp deployment. So that's something that we have available in the platform today. And then if you kind of looking further for what's coming up next, then stay tuned, because as I said, I think our GA messaging will start coming up around, again, Safe Harbor around January, in terms of new integration and new ability to work with WhatsApp directly. So for now, if that's something that you've been really eager to do and try doing, then that's available already on the accounts. Cool, we're nearly done. Just only, I guess there's a lot of information, a lot of details, but I wanted to share just a couple of things where to take this next. So if you do want to learn more about mobile, if you do want to dive into other things, I guess I would encourage you to look into Trailhead first. It's a good trail. It's about 4 hours worth of time. Could be a bit less if you're a fast reader, but it's covering like everything from strategy, contact management in terms of what is the impact when you start talking mobile, and how does it impact in terms of subscriber key, contact key, mix up, and so forth. So that's a good way, and then covers every of the channels that we discussed today in a bit more details. There's a really, really cool self-guided tour. If you've never seen that, it's a simple, probably 7 or 8 or 9 screens that are captured, but the summary of what I went through with you, but at the just platform level, it will give you like a nice sort of screen-like experience that you just kind of navigate through. Oh yeah, you can see it's about 9 screens there. Just a recap of what we went through in the over the web. So if you ever need to share with your colleagues, if you're just curious to kind of get a quick refresher without going and deep diving into that, that's a really nice, cool, nifty tool to use. And then if you're part of our partner network, because I did see a couple of names from the partner world, we do have mobile courses on Partner Learning Camp, and we're right now working on a refresh for mobile specifically. So it'll be more activities to work on. It will be more practical and incorporate like a lot of messaging that I've shared with you today, but maybe with additional stuff depending on when we're going to land it live effectively. And with that, I think I'm going to get to Q&A if we still have. I think we've got a few minutes left, so I'll be keen to look into questions.
That's so awesome, Vlad. I really appreciate the session. Especially the Mobile Studio. There are very few webinars available on the Mobile Studio. This session is really helpful. So I have a couple of questions sent to me in the direct chat. I'm going to post it in the regular chat window. So I'll read that out. So the question is, we took the services of an agency for shortcode acquisition and setup. After the setup and transition, will the agency still be the owner of the shortcode? Earlier experience was that we weren't able to add another shortcode or MMS capabilities since we do not own the shortcode.
Gotcha. All right. So with Marketing Cloud, I think it's different in the sense that as a customer, you directly cannot go and provision the number. We do have a set of authorized partners that sort of take care of that setup and provisioning, including professional services. Regardless of the avenue that you go through, once we get to the code and it's get assigned to your account, you are effectively the owner of that code. It's not shared with anyone outside unless you choose to get through the shared codes, which I believe we stopped taking that practice. Like they're very restricted scenarios where we might go. So you can get the code, it get assigned to your account, you're the owner. So if you need to start adding like keywords, if you want to start creating different configurations on that, you're absolutely free to do that. The agency / partner / professional services organization, they would be only helping you to get onboarded and configured, but you become like you kind of transitioning as you owning that solution, you owning the code, and it stays with you for the time of the contract.
And the shortcode as well, it stays with the company, right? Not the agency.
No, I believe it is still assigned to the company. So like I will only take one thing and reserve that, because my 100% knowledge could be varying, because in, for example, North America, like United States and Canada, there are slightly different processes. So if there is any sort of legal terminology around ownership of the short codes, maybe it's slightly differently provisioned. But in order to kind of overcome that and explain it, like if you go to our help portal, in the Mobile Connect section specifically, there is a whole page that sort of governs all different countries' sort of specifics and uniqueness. And if you're ever uncertain, I would encourage you to simply reach out to your account executive. We have internal guide by country, what is in terms of ownership, in terms of setup, in terms of legal requirements in order to provision the codes. But again, from memory, I'm 99% confident that as soon as you get the code into the platform, you become the owner, because that whole process of establishing the code, configuring the platform, it takes us to go, who is the owner of the code? It gets provisioned into the platform. It gets signed up through the aggregator. It gets to the carrier. So there's a whole set of technical things that happen in addition to legal things. So if contractually, your agency wants to be an owner of the code, that's probably a different story. Again, I'll take that one thing to say, I'm not the legal advisor, so I would encourage you to review that from the legal standpoint of view. But again, simplistically, you should be the sole owner after configuration. If you're in doubt, get your account executive, tell them like, hey, we'd love to understand how that works. And before that, just do a simple research on Help Portal to go into the Mobile Connect, look at your country and see what are the different specifics. If there is anything that says like short codes are only owned by a vendor or a provider or something else, then that would be the difference. But other than that, it should be you, the owner for it.
That helps, Vlad. Thank you. And the next question is, we wanted to send a transactional SMS for appointment confirmation and for reminders, and regardless of the opt-in and opt-out status. And using one short code opted out few people.
Yeah.
So there are already opt-outs on a short code. So if they still want to send the SMS to the people who opted out, what is the best approach?
Practically, we always recommend to have two codes. Like in my experience, this was just something that we used to do. We spoke with a couple of customers. The challenge in the way it sort of works is Australia, I believe, is the only country, as an exception, where you can handle unsubscribe, or like if people opt out, they can opt out from the code. So you can, a keyword. So if you think about your structure, you've got a code, let's say it's your mobile number, then you've got different keywords that you're trying to sort of communicate with. In Australia, you can say, you can use that keyword as almost like a publication list to say, if people sort of interact in that keyword and they opt out from that keyword, they can opt out from just these particular keyword conversations. But I can still engage with them on different other means. Everywhere else, as soon as you opt out, regardless of the keyword, we opt out at the code level. So the mobile number can no longer talk to your phone. And that's where that problem lies. Transactional nature comes into the conversation to say, we need to almost overwrite the status, and the only way to do that is you'll need to initiate the opt-in in the real time, which will be probably something like UMO and so forth. We tried these workarounds, they become very ugly, and it's difficult to handle because you sort of doing that like in a really odd and weird way. You need to opt in, then you need to send the message, and then you need to opt out again. So it becomes really cumbersome. Therefore, the better right way to do that, you've got one phone number that you use for all the marketing conversations, and if people opt out, that's fine. And then you use the other message, the other number that you use purely for transactional conversations. And you can handle potentially or overwrite that. But again, there is a sort of compliance where if people get to opt out, because there is a default option to opt out on any keyword, you still need to be mindful, like if you want to re-opt in, even if you've used the avenues to re-opt in an individual, there is a legal sort of binding component to say it's legally okay to do that. And I would again encourage you, depending on where you are geographically, to consult with your legal team to say, if we do have that option, if we do get to the point where we can explicitly re-opt in people for on that second long code or code that is used for transactional messaging, is there any challenge with the fact that people did unsubscribe before? Like, can they take us to court effectively? Because SMS itself is like a super sensitive nature of comms, where even transactional, I guess that can still yield a bit of a like, why do you talk to me because I didn't allow you to do so? So it's more being mindful of what the legal implication is. Practically, two codes would be the best option to handle it, because you don't have complicated, convoluted solutions and mixing marketing and transactional targeting.
That is really helpful, Vlad. So, and the next question is, can we send WhatsApp message to a group of people using the sync chat messaging step in journey?
Yeah, so Sync itself is more, think of that as a vendor that provides us ability to connect to the chat message, to WhatsApp messaging channel. So they already have an integration, and what we're doing is we providing like an opportunity to say, if you send through them, the message effectively goes up into WhatsApp. But in the way that you do the messaging, it's done through the journey. And therefore, if you're thinking about doing like a campaign style execution, you just do it through the journey. You execute through the journey activity and send the message.
Thanks, Vlad. So I think those are all the questions. Any other questions? We have last few minutes. Please post them in the chat window. And I have been seeing very positive feedback in the chat.
Yeah,
thanks very
great.
much.
I've seen. I think there was only one more thing that I didn't answer. It was like there was a question around the difference between Twilio and mobile push. I think you'll have to look into that a bit of a study yourself, because mainly I'm not necessarily contrasting them to different platforms, to different vendors. So they both send push notifications. There'll be different features that you will see enabled by default and what you can do. From what I've heard, I feel like Twilio is more developer-oriented tool versus Marketing Cloud. You get more user-friendly tools, but again, could be wrong. Personally, I don't have experience with Twilio, so I'm not really in a good position to tell you that. I'll be honest with that. But if you ever in doubt, like, can you do these things with Marketing Cloud through the push notifications or through the rather mobile push studio, feel free to reach out. I'll be happy to guide you. But contrasting them, it's probably something that you'll have to do it on your own.
That makes sense. So I think those are all the questions for today.
All right.
Yeah, I think that is it. Thank you for the wonderful session, Vlad. And I thank everyone for joining today's session.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Hope to see you again in the next session. Thank you, guys. Bye.